to the New Haven Innovation Collaborative Podcast. We are here at the New Haven Independent. You're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're here this morning with Eric Ray, who's the entrepreneur in residence at the Ives Squared New Haven Library Innovation Center. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a little gray and rainy out, but excited to be here for some conversation about Ives Squared and personal coaching.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's just kick off. What is the entrepreneur in residence?
The entrepreneur in residence. Probably the easiest way to describe this is to talk about what I'm actually doing there. So, so I've got office hours, and I'm responsible for one program a week, and there is a fair amount of latitude on what I do with that program. I had come in wanting to focus on a specific group of folks, which are near and dear to my heart, which are artists. Being an artist myself, thinking for many years now about how to make a business out of my art, I thought, wouldn't it be great to invite folks in to have them talk about what their experience is, and also, admittedly, a little selfishly, I could learn a little something as well. So that's the one part, the programs. And then the second piece is I actually provide coaching to anyone who signs up for office hours and wants to get a little one-on-one about their business or venture or what have you. So those are the two major pieces.
And so these are people who are coming into the library. So could you tell us a little bit about what Ives Squared is at the library, the center that you're working in?
Yeah, so Ives Squared is this really amazing space in the library. I have to admit, prior to this position, I had very limited knowledge of what was going on there. And I'm a little...
Well, it wasn't going on terribly long. I think it just started this last year.
Yeah. But even still, there's just amazing things. So it's sort of this multimedia kind of a bonanza of amazing that's going on there with between the Tinker Lab and which is they've got 3D printers, and they've got a laser cutter, and they've got like a wood burner, and all this just amazing stuff that's available for any and everyone. I think maybe you need a library card, but
I think so. And they provide the training, everything you need to tinker.
Everything you need to tinker. It's actually quite impressive, and the folks there are knowledgeable about all the machines. So if you don't know what you're doing, there's plenty of resources there to help kind of walk you through. I think the thing I'm always most fascinated by is the VR little station they have there, virtual reality station.
Well, you go in there anytime during the day. There's like 2 or 3 people with the VR headsets checking out something.
Yeah.
And some of the times it's just like a spaceship racing game, and some of the times it's someone in a world that they've built.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive, and I really enjoy these spaces where you're really only limited by your imagination, and that's how I think of Ives Squared when I walk in there. It's like imagination realized, which is a very cool space.
And for putting that in a library, which if people haven't been in modern libraries recently, might think of as sort of stuffy places with books.
Yeah. But
really, Ives in particular, but all of New Haven's libraries have really been moving in that direction of transforming what the experience of shared resources are.
Yeah.
As it's one of our few real free public spaces that exist just for being helpful to residents.
For sure. Yeah. I think, there's something that there's something about that space where we are kind of democratizing knowledge and experiences, for anyone to just kind of walk in and have this access, is really something of a wonder. It's pretty amazing. And like you said, it's the one of the few places that really strictly belongs to the people, right? You can go in there and engage in all kinds of very cool stuff that is really there for folks to take advantage of.
And so one of the pieces of information that IveSquares is trying to democratize is business coaching and access to the advice and skills and experience that you provide for people.
Yeah.
So what do you think is really at the core of what you're offering through the office hours or through the mentorship and coaching?
Sure. So I've had a very specific approach to this as well, which is I sort of came into this with the understanding that there are resources available for folks if they want to get help with a business plan, or they need some sort of what I'll call like a concrete service, right? We've got SCORE, we've got other sort of organizations that will help folks walk through a lease agreement or a contract or a loan, application. There's organizations that'll do that.
And those are really skill-based. Do you know how to file your taxes, do insurance?
That's right. Yeah. And so my approach, because of my background as a coach, was really to focus on the individual. What is the stuff of an entrepreneur? What does it take to be successful from a personal resource perspective? How do you dig in to your values and your purpose in life? And help to sort of connect that to the everyday work that you're doing, such that it propels you forward. And so that's really the area I've been focused in. I certainly get questions that run the gamut for sure, and I do my best to try to refer folks to places where they can get really solid answers. I don't claim to be any expert on like loan agreements, but if what I am really good at is helping people connect to the things that really matter to them. And I think ultimately being very rooted in those things help you manage the day-to-day challenges of being an entrepreneur.
And so without getting into the details too much of any particular person, could you tell us what are some of the ideas that people walk into IveSquared with that they want to get off the ground?
Yeah, I've been surprised. It actually runs the gamut. Anything from I've spoken to a couple of writers who are looking to kind of put themselves out there. I've spoken to people who are engaged in some kind of food. It's probably a second popular one. They've got some idea for some. In this case, it's been a lot of health food things. Sweetener alternatives and health food stores that sort of combine, grocery stores and a restaurant and sort of put together in one. What else have we had? Curriculum. A lot of, curricula after school programs and sort of proprietary, sort of tutoring programs and that kind of thing. So it really runs the gamut, and it's awesome to see. I mean, it comes from everyone and everywhere. I've had people who are here local in New Haven, and I've had folks come as far away as Norwalk to come see me in my office hours, and I'm just really I'm taken aback sometimes.
There are folks driving in from Norwalk.
Yeah. There's people. I've got one particular person who comes in. She's they've come to see me twice. And from Norwalk.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that shows the power of a library that's investing in resources that might not be available elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so clearly, you've been chosen as one of those resources, a human resource that people can check out, like a book or a database. Tell us a little bit about your experience as an entrepreneur. What's your background that made you passionate about this work?
Yeah, sure. So I've been an entrepreneur essentially all my life. I've had regular kind of 9-to-5 jobs as well, but my passion always lies in kind of like ownership and that kind of startup energy that I really love, that part of it. So I've actually started 4 businesses, 2 of which are still up and running and doing well. And this goes all the way back to high school. The first thing I started on my own was an ice cream truck. I had an ice cream truck in high school. Still, to this day, the best gig I ever had in my life. It's sort of sad to think like, well, maybe I peaked in high school, but man, that was just a great job. And I think I say that because it was my first taste of bringing an idea into the world and experiencing what that felt like to see it actually working. And that feeling has stuck with me all the years, and it's part of the reason why I still do. Part of the reason why I'm still an entrepreneur, why I'm willing to sort of get kicked in the teeth on a daily basis as a business owner.
Just chasing that first hit, that first feeling of seeing it.
That's right.
Click.
That's right. Yeah. And I love it. And the reality is, I think any entrepreneur will tell you that most people don't hit pay dirt the first time. You work hard, and maybe you iterate, 20 times before you get it right. And so that's a part of what it is to grow and learn as an entrepreneur, and part of the reason why I keep doing the things I'm doing.
Well, it's also wonderful to start with a product that people so clearly want and love.
It sold itself, man.
Ice cream brought right to them.
It definitely sold itself. I had no issue with that part of it at all. So yeah.
So tell us about the two businesses that you have running now.
Yeah. So the first one is my coaching practice. So I'm a leadership development and personal development coach. Right now focusing on entrepreneurs and artists, actually. But I do a little bit of diversity and inclusion work. I do some facilitation. All of that I sort of keep under the umbrella of my coaching work.
And what is the profile of somebody who's looking for that kind of service? If someone's listening, what is the particular set of desires or needs that really would draw somebody to?
Yeah. So as far as the diversity and inclusion work, that is mostly organizations, corporations, the folks looking to pay closer attention to what's happening in their internal politics and how they are showing up in the world and showing up for each other as an organization. And so that is a lot of facilitation work, a lot of group work, and it's present, it's challenging, it's hard, and I really I enjoy the work. I enjoy when that moment when you see people sort of starting to let their shoulders down and they're relaxing into the experience and recognizing that, it's going to be hard work. We're not ever going to sort of snap the fingers and get to the final solution. It's a practice and an ongoing one. And typically my role is to help to walk them into that practice and make sure that they are kind of paying attention to the things that are important. So that's sort of one piece of work. And then as far as the personal development and leadership development side of the house, that's really, well, what's turned into my experience is I've sort of carved out these two places for myself. One are kind of younger folks, maybe 3 or 4 years out of college, in a kind of professional setting, and recognizing, oh, this is not actually the thing I wanted for myself, and helping them kind of transition and find something that more deeply connects to who they are and what they want for themselves in the world. And then probably a more senior individual who has maybe had a career or two and is deciding, for Act 3, I want to do the thing that speaks to my soul. And so I'm there to kind of help walk them through that process and, really connect to what matters to them.
And that's a lens, a viewpoint, a perspective that seems directly applicable to helping people with the early stages of their idea when they walk in a library.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So the I know the other business.
Yeah.
And well, the reason that I bring it up with a smile is that I think you can also purchase your product at the library through the Orchid Cafe.
Yeah.
But tell us about your delicious soups.
Yeah. So my brother and I started a company called Sopa New Haven. Sopa is Spanish for soup, and we are big soup fans. And
now is the season.
Yeah, now is the season. We started the business a year ago. The quick story of how we got started is, my brother and I had been kicking around business ideas for ever, I don't know, 10 years or something. I don't know. I took a trip to Peru last year. And if you know anything about Peru, it's incredibly high up in altitude. And I was sick. The altitude was really, really tough on my body. I'm born and raised here in New Haven, right on the shoreline. The air is thick here.
Those thin mountain paths, the thin mountain air.
Yeah, the thin mountain air was not agreeing with me. And so soup actually was the first meal that I could eat in Peru that didn't make me more sick. Right. So it's this weird juxtaposition of being hungry, but knowing that if I ate, it was just going to make me more ill. And the first time I had soup, it was easy enough on my stomach to digest. And so it didn't make me ill, and I actually felt nourished, and I could feel the nutrients kind of seeping back into my bloodstream. And so, amongst a whole bunch of other magical experiences there in Peru, this one really stuck with me, and I came back home and sat down at my mom's kitchen table with my brother and said, hey, why don't we start a soup business? And Sopa was born.
And so people can get your soup now at Orchid Cafe.
Yeah, so in this very moment, we are navigating through the regulatory process and going through inspections and stuff like that. We our operations had been actually in West Haven, and the place where we were cooking closed, and so we needed to find a new kitchen.
And what sort of place was that?
It was a diner. Working diner is a place that I frequented and became friendly with the owner. And when he was sort of present for the evolution of Sopa, and so and he was one of the very early people that I spoke to about how might I make this work, and what are your thoughts about it? And he was very encouraging and supportive of the whole process. And so when I came to him and asked if we could use his kitchen to cook, he was elated at the opportunity to help out. This was a person, an individual, shout out to Chef Jeff. This was a person who, sort of knew what it was like to start something. He talked about selling hot sauce, his homemade hot sauce, out of his trunk for a little while before he got started. So he knew kind of what that, scrappy, fight for it kind of energy was.
What it was like to get that first hit of that ice cream truck feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So so we cooked there for the first season, and it was great. And this season, unfortunately, he had to close his doors. Is a good thing for him. It wasn't actually unfortunate. It was a good closing. So I'm happy for him. He's moved on to other sort of cool things, and having one of the things about being an entrepreneur is, to some degree, you're sort of saying, I'm the boss, but I'm doing everything, right? You have to do everything at first. And so he just sort of recognized that he wanted more family time. And so he decided that this was the best move for him and his family. So 100% supportive, even though, it sort of plunged us into this kind of different environment. That being said, I'm super excited to be back in New Haven. I'm glad that our operations will be all sort of New Haven centered. And we are, like I said, just kind of navigating through the process of inspections and getting all our paperwork in line so that we can get back out there, because it's soup season. It's time.
So those listeners who might not be familiar, New Haven just changed a law in their health codes that transitioned from requiring each business to have their own particular licensing to each facility. And so I think you're one of many food entrepreneurs, particularly those who've gone through the City Seed pipeline, who really have a product ready to go and are finding that the facilities costs of kitchens are just staggering. I mean, a startup company isn't going to necessarily build out a full commercial kitchen,
right?
And so there's potentially some exciting news coming down the pipe with some of the community food organizations coming together to try to answer some of these questions. But it's clearly a need that we have locally for people with a vision, whether they walk into your doors at the library or go through the City Seed program or go through some of Yale's programs. I was hearing stories about Oni, who was here earlier for Sci City, was telling me about some of his folks are driving all the way up to Boston to get rentable kitchen space.
My goodness.
That they could work with. So it's one of the problems I think we've identified. We're trying to find a way to sort of streamline and answer.
Yeah. I think, and New Haven is such a food town, I mean, between the trucks, we've got some amazing food trucks and unbelievable restaurants all over the city. And so it seems like a very natural fit. And certainly our experience has been surprising, I think. I don't think I was quite prepared for how scarce space might be and how long it might take to go through the process. And so New Haven's ready for sure. Yeah.
Well, as soon as your space is sorted out, how can folks get some SOPA soup?
So one of the nice things about SOPA is that we don't actually have a brick and mortar. Everything is done online. And so, we were really intentional.
How modern?
What's that?
How modern?
Well, so we were really intentional about wanting to run lean, right?
Yeah.
And so, we recognized fairly quickly that we were not in a position to, rent out space or have a building, and neither of us were interested in going that particular route. And so we decided, we'll make these soups, we'll have pre-orders, and we deliver right to your door. So the way that it works is, we send out an email once a week. In that email, we'll tell you what soups we're cooking for the week. You can order directly from that email, pay directly into that email, and then we'll deliver right to your door. Delivery days typically on Tuesday.
And that website would be?
That is www.sopanewhaven.com. SOPA spelled SOPA, sopanewhaven.com.
So you get to learn about some soups and learn one word in Spanish.
There you go. At least.
At least step by step.
Right.
And so with the way that the library works, there's sort of a semester schedule with the entrepreneur in residence and the creative in residence.
Right.
And so what are some of the lessons you think you've taken with you from your experience at the library, and what are some lessons you hope to impart to the library for their work as they continue on?
Yeah. So what have I learned? Well, one of the things that seems really clear and obvious to me is that there is a real hunger in the city, particularly among artists, to kind of not only share information, but get information from other artists, right? I think there's this really budding artist scene. I mean, I think, artists have been present in New Haven since forever, but there's a sort of there's this critical mass, I think, that is happening here in the city, and particularly in my experience among artists of color who are sort of coming together and saying, we want to create an environment that's actually supportive of the work that we're doing, instead of having to kind of knock on doors and hope that someone's going to let us in. I think people are sort of saying, we're going to just start making our own doors. And so I think that is one of the things that has showed up in the library when I put out this call for folks to come in. I've tried to focus very specifically on artists of color and women in terms of the folks who are coming into the library to talk about their experiences. And so to me, that really represents an opportunity for growth, not only for individual artists, but I think for the city as a whole, because there's this conversation that artists are having that I think is going to ultimately be critically important to the direction that we go in as a city, and really finding ways to support that community, because they in turn kind of drive a lot of the sort of they're tastemakers, and they're perspective givers, and there are conversations that we can more readily and easily engage in as it relates to the arts, that we may not be able to necessarily sit across the table and talk words, right? But we can celebrate a piece of art. We can go to a play and begin a conversation. We can listen to a piece of music from a local artist, talking about their experience either growing up here or what's happening nationally. And so that represents, I think, a richness for the city that feels on the edges of something big. So,
and that's one of the things that you're drawing out, is really that all of those artists themselves are having to market themselves, sell themselves, participate in capitalism in a way that is very similar or identical to some of the work that we think of as an entrepreneur,
right.
Where very often we think of as an entrepreneur as like a sort of a growth-focused mindset. But over half of the people working in co-working spaces across the country are so-called solopreneurs, where it's really about the professional services that they're offering. But it seems more and more we're asking people in all walks of life to participate as a capitalist, whether it's Airbnb and renting out their homes, whether it's taking extra time and capitalizing on their car to drive. And so what made you think about focusing on artists to bring this skill set and build this community with?
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, it was sort of a selfish endeavor, I have to admit. I mean, like I said,
that's what you were thinking about.
Yeah. I'm an artist, and I'm constantly looking for outlets and opportunities to be able to share my art, but also being a solopreneur, I got bills, man.
Yeah.
So that's really that was really where it started, and quickly upon talking to a handful of folks, quickly sort of realized, I'm not here by myself. There are lots of people who are having the same conversation either in their circles or just in their own head. Like, how am I gonna make this work? How am I gonna? Where do I need to go? How do I set my prices? That is like, at its most fundamental, one of the more common questions that I get. Like, how do I value my services? And that ultimately leads to a larger sort of philosophical question, which is, how are we thinking about arts? How are we thinking? What do we call arts? What counts and what doesn't? And so, so it just sort of seemed like a no-brainer to kind of pursue this, and that's kind of been my North Star. It's sort of been like, if this is a thing that I think is important, probably there are others that do too. And let's see if we can gather some of those people together and try to make some sense of it.
And how do you feel that has been received? How's it going?
I think it's going great. I think it's been well received. The programs are pretty consistently well attended. I think there have been some wonderful gems and jewels that have come out in our conversations. I really run it as a very sort of interview style, very similar to this actually, where I'll be sitting across from an artist and just sort of asking questions, and then open it up to the audience for them to ask questions. And it's been absolutely fantastic. And I think one of the very sort of interesting things is because, as I mentioned earlier, I've been focusing on women and people of color. And so I've been hearing from that community sort of people saying it was so good to see ourselves reflected there. And in fact have had people who have come in for example, office hours, who said, I came because I saw your brown face and I felt like you were somebody that I could trust and talk to. And that just sort of spoke volumes to me. So, so I think it's going very well.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
So going to that question of how do you evaluate or put a price on art, it seems very similar to the question of how do you evaluate or put a price on coaching, which is, you can look up the price for the other soup competitors,
right,
and sort of get a sense of what people are willing to pay for a meal.
Yeah.
But each of those seem something that has such a full array of prices that really range from as little as you can pay to some of the most expensive things that we have.
Yeah.
And one of the things that in the conversation with Oni that really came to the fore was that the education that's being offered at Yale for students in entrepreneurship is not business 101. It is not here's how to put together a business plan. It really is here's how to find your sense of story. Here's how to build your value proposition.
Right.
And so much of that seems very similar to the work that you're describing. It seems this common thread throughout people starting new things.
Yeah.
Need to really hone and define their sense of identity and their mission. And so I'm just wondering, this is sort of a theme I've been working on and trying to find the best ways to articulate, because the term sort of soft skills winds up being in some ways sort of the catch-all for this, but very often that is a soft skills that's in the context of workforce development,
right?
In which it's almost this presumed sort of default that everyone has. You just need to get people up to that default, and then there's sort of almost this assumption that it just sort of levels off, and that the high end, what you describe as leadership development, right? That kind of coaching, really almost you see in corporate settings of like somebody willing to spend $100,000 to get an executive better at whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Which seems odd given how much we pay executives. But I was wondering if you just I mean, I don't really have a question here, but speak to that, because it seems that, you know, there are groups like U of Next over at District as well that are doing similar things that have both sides of that spectrum, and sort of there seems a lot lost in the middle as well.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I think, one of the things that's coming up for me is I'm thinking of, I think it's Simon Sinek who said people will purchase your why, right? And the idea there is, you can get a widget anywhere. Why should I get this widget? And that comes down to the why. Why are you in business? Why are you doing this? And ultimately, that is the thing that people can connect to. And I think if you broaden that out, what ultimately we're talking about is what's the story? What's happening there? What's the piece of my own humanity that I can connect to, and so therefore make me feel some sense of ownership, that I can see myself somewhere reflected in this product or service or person or organization or company. And so I think the companies that are successful are the ones that do that well, that are able to connect the dots for people. But in order to do that, organizations, executives, people need to know what their why is. Why are they engaged in this? And this is the sort of the North Star that helps to guide various decisions as they get made. So, for example, I'm engaged in lots of different kind of work. You know, I own a business. I'm a coach. I have this entrepreneur in residence. I'm a musician. And so when people ask me what I do, it's not like a one-word answer. I can't give them like I'm an accountant or I'm this or I'm that.
Well, that could use some why too.
Yeah. But what I can say, and what is true for me, is I love people. That's my job. I get to wake up and I get to love people every day. And that shows up in all different kinds of ways. So I get to nourish people. The music is a way that I love myself, for example. And so that's the thing that ultimately guides me when I'm making decisions about how to work with my clients and sort of thinking about what does this individual need right now? And I always ground myself in the question, if I truly loved this person, what decision would I make? And sometimes that's the hard decision. Sometimes that's the difficult thing. I have to say the difficult thing that no one else is willing to tell them. I have to ask the difficult question that no one else has asked them before because they didn't want to hurt their feelings or step on their toes. But the reality is, if I really love this person, I would help point to something that they're not necessarily willing to see. And so So this why I'm engaged in this work in this way is it's the anchor. It's the thing that everything else flows from. And so to me, that's why this piece is so incredibly important. Spending time thinking about your purpose, your role, your values, and how those things actually show up in the world. It's different to sort of say, these things are important, but then what do you do with that? How does that actually show up? And that's the stuff of fulfillment. And I think ultimately that's why we're here, to fulfill some potential for ourselves and for our community, people around us.
And that comes with a much broader sense of wellness than just, can this person move on to the next step of their business or get a job?
Yeah.
And that's a thread that runs through not just that work, but the whole spectrum of meaning, community, and hopefully, I guess, is also some of what the library is trying to do.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, I know we are reaching sort of the end of our time together. I think that's probably the best sentiment that I can think of ending with, though.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Before we go, though, for anybody who's been listening throughout the entire show and wondering how they can contact you or get in touch for the variety of things that you do,
sure.
What is the best way for people?
Yeah. So you can email me at eric@potentperspective.com. That's the name of my coaching company. It's Potent Perspective. You can look me up online. Eric@potentperspective.com, or of course, SOPA New Haven, www.sopanewhaven.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to having some of your soup in this gray, rainy weather.
Yeah, we're looking forward to getting started again. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
با پوکر یا تیت خانا لا ارب یه مال